Thieves in the Church, from the Gospel of John, chapter 12, verse number 4, 5, and 6. Then saith one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him, why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and had the bag, and bare what was put therein. In other words, Judas was not concerned about the ministry of Jesus. He was concerned about how much money was coming into the common treasury, because he was pilfering from the treasury that was meant to support the work of the disciples in the Lord Jesus Christ. Thieves in the church. Now, I have 42 years of serving as pastor, and in those 42 years, I encountered one very clear case of theft in the church. And it started this way. A certain woman who worked with the youth in the church asked for a credit card so that she could purchase, quote, supplies for the youth work and the Sunday school. And the governing board granted permission. One day, the treasurer of the Sunday school called me and said that the individual was charging personal items on this credit card and not reimbursing the Sunday school for those items. So this led to another investigation, and that is that there were offerings missing. Now, these offerings came from a program similar to a Bible school program. And the parents brought the offerings each day or each week. It went for about 4 weeks, I think. And the offerings were collected at the program, like a Vacation Bible School program. It was not Vacation Bible School. It was held in the summer. The offerings were to be turned into the church treasurer to go into the church funds. Upon investigation, it was found out that these offerings were never turned in to the church treasurer. So to try to help you picture the situation, if you can imagine each and every day throughout the week in the summer, youth are coming into the church and parents are bringing maybe $10 per child or something to cover the cost of the day in the church. And that money was collected, and it was to be turned over to the church treasurer. So the same woman who opened up the credit card was also the individual who was working with this youth program. And it was noticed that these offerings had never been turned in to the church treasurer. They disappeared. Now, in addition, the woman went to the woman's society or the woman's group and said, these youth need a scholarship. Many of them can't afford this. So she talked the women's society into providing some money for scholarships. And I guess the women's society issued her a check to provide the necessary amount of money needed for youth to come to the program. So how much was that? That was maybe about $800 or so, claiming that she was going to use this money to give scholarships to the youth that were coming to the program that was similar to a vacation Bible school program. So if you're following me and you're starting to add all this up, you have the initial credit card charges of personal items. Then that led to the offerings that were collected at the youth program in the summer never being turned into church treasurer, and then going to the Women's Society and asking for scholarships, and then checking the records and finding out that there was never one case of a scholarship given to one youth at the program. So you can see it's adding up now. This is just for 1 year. That's the whole thing about this is, quote, just tip of the iceberg. What I'm trying to say is, over the years, much had been stolen. But this is just reports about one particular year. So what happened was, I prayed about it, and I know what God said to me is He wants a pure church. In other words, this is not the way of the church. And the church that Christ wants is to be without wrinkle, without blemish, as it says in Ephesians. So the only correct thing to do is to confront the woman and ask her to come privately and in confidence to talk about these things, the credit card charges, the missing funds, and indeed the scholarships that were never issued. So I went to her home, and she answered the door. No one else was around. And I said that the treasurer and I would like to meet with you in confidence to discuss different things about the credit card and the offerings and so forth. I said, no one else will know. So the meeting was to be me and the Sunday school treasurer, not the church treasurer, and the woman. Now, we set up a time at the church where no one would be around, and it would be a total quiet, confidential meeting. So as you might gather, the two at the meeting were myself and the treasurer. She never showed. Later, in a meeting at the board, the church board, she admitted she had the offerings at home in a drawer. She was told to bring the offerings and turn them into the treasurer of the church. She never did. So it was kind of left up in the air, and at this point in time, I'm just about ready to depart this church. I'd been there for 5 years and move on to another call. So after my departure, I learned that indeed it was clear that theft had occurred in the church. Of course, the woman left the church, and just for this 1 year, my estimate was a rough estimate. It would have been about $8,000. All the shenanigans that were going on with the Women's Society issuing scholarships, the credit card, personal charges, and the missing offerings. Now that was just for 1 year. Now, time did not permit, and it wasn't really the right thing to do, but had I gone back in time with financial records and the treasurer, I think we would have discovered that this pattern was there, and there was much more involved in terms of theft at this particular church. Now, as far as I know, no charges were ever filed, and that was never the intent, by the way, in the private meeting. The only thing about the private meeting was going to be that the treasurer and I agreed that we would just give her the chance to make restitution quietly and privately, and no one would know except for myself and the treasurer. That's it. No one. But obviously this woman did not want to do that. She wanted to try to just, quote, get away with things. And it took, I think, a period of about 2 years after my departure for indeed the church to realize, yes, this woman had stolen from the church. And of course she left the church back to Judas. Judas wasn't really concerned about the ministry. He was only concerned about how much money came in and how much he could pilfer. So, how common is it? Well, according to this particular organization, according to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ACFE, in the year 2023, 945 billion was given by Christians. Of that, 62 billion was taken by fraud or embezzlement. Now, the term I've been using is theft. You understand these are kind of different categories. Fraud's a little different than embezzlement. Embezzlement's different from fraud. And of course, both of them are different from theft. So I'm lumping everything together for you. And you might just say the missing money or the missing offerings overall can happen through theft, fraud, or embezzlement. Now, one of the terms they give it is ecclesiastical crime. Now, the thing about ecclesiastical crime is that unless charges are filed officially through the state, no one's going to do anything. In other words, it's up to the church to do something. And my hope and my intent, as well as the treasurer in this situation, was we wanted to keep any state or sheriff or police out of it completely. And just let it be totally, privately, an ecclesiastical affair. But nevertheless, unless charges are filed, nothing is going to be done in any situation for a church, whether it's theft, fraud, or embezzlement. In other words, it will be up to the church leaders to get it taken care of. Now that ties into the separation of church and state. It ties into the two realms, the secular realm and the sacred realm. Now, why does theft exist in the church? Well, first of all, actually, the one word that covers all these is easy. It's easy to do. It's easy. Why is it easy? Well, many churches don't have protective measures in place. I could talk a little bit about that in another video. Many churches are lax, extremely trusting, okay? And no matter who the person is, it's just not good to, in a sense, trust anybody, because we know the love of money is the root of all evil. And when you see a lot of money flowing in front of you, temptations can arise very easily and very quickly for anyone. So it's easy to do. Protective measures are not really in place in many churches. And in all the churches I've served, I would say that maybe only a fraction had good protective measures. It's easy to slip into the trusting anything and everyone and not having safeguards in a church. So it's easy to do, and it's a trusting environment, meaning that suspicion levels are almost non-existent. You don't suspect the one who comes to church every Sunday. You don't suspect the woman who has 4 children and is highly involved in youth work and who makes it happen that your church now has 15 youth in your church. And that was the case here that I was facing. In other words, her credibility was really good because she had a lot of youth coming to church. But that was her cover as well, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So it's easy to do because others do not wish to expose a thief. In other words, the thief is a fellow friend. The thief is a neighbor. And a thief is a relative. And in small churches, relatives are interlocked in small churches. So they certainly don't want to expose so-and-so because that's their cousin or that's their nephew or their niece or something along those lines, or that's their granddaughter. So it's easy to do because others do not wish to expose a thief or embarrass the church. Now that's another issue. It's an embarrassment that somebody's stealing from a church or somebody's conducting fraud or somebody's conducting embezzlement in a church. It's an embarrassment for the whole church. And it's easy to do because church leaders probably will not file charges and prosecute. In other words, the thief knows that the individuals that are next to him or her in the church pews on Sunday morning will probably not file charges. So in other words, they can, quote, get away with it pretty easily.